We're talking all things 2023 rookies today. And with rookies, you can bet that yesterday's price is not today's price. Welcome in. We've got just myself and Brian O'Leary today, doing a little switch up with two podcasts this week. The second one will be with Brian and Matt, which we'll probably post around Thursday morning. So like I said, we're talking all things rookies today, 2023 rookies. We might even talk about some of the 2024 rookie class coming in, but really want to hit on, Brian, some of these rookies that maybe we haven't given as much time to. We've talked about Puka, Tank Dell. We've hit on JSN quite a bit. We might talk about him a little bit today, but really want to hit on, I know one that I've had a lot of questions on is Jordan Addison. So Jordan Addison's someone that I've been lower on. So he's one we've been getting questions on. We'll be talking basically all positions. We'll go through tight end. We'll go through maybe the little running back competition between Bijan and Gibbs, which doesn't seem like much of a competition anymore. So I know, Brian, you've had some questions also that have come through regarding some players that people want us to touch on.
Yeah, so you mentioned Addison, so we'll definitely deep dive there. But we also have received some requests to hear about Rashee Rice a little bit deeper, who's obviously a hot name right now. I've been a lot lower than most, I would say, to this point. And maybe today we'll, after reading some of these stats and finding some stuff out, maybe I'll change my mind here. So, just quote the OJs and later on Jalen Rose. You got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, so like the old Bill Simmons, Jalen Rose podcast back in the day. I used to love those podcasts where they would deep dive each and every team. So, Rashee Rice, I've been a little bit lower on him as well. And like he's not he really up until the last 2 weeks hasn't been getting the full allotment of routes, and now he is. Throughout the year, he's been kind of like that guy from a value standpoint that's like early 2, late 1, kind of like in the in-betweener. Like if you paid a late 1, you probably overpaid. If you paid an early 2, you're like, yes, that was great. That was a great deal. So like from a stat standpoint, and we might talk like more stats today, try to keep them pretty surface level, but the big ones being for me with these receivers, we're talking about target share and air yard share in combination. So just to kind of set the table on target share. If you're looking at a 30% target share, that's like your league winning type of player. That's like your Justin Jefferson this year, like a CD Lamb, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson's up there. The fantasy points haven't come, but 30%, 25%, you're looking at guys like Olave, Waddle, Diggs right now, Devontae Smith. And then 20% is like a good wide receiver 2. If they're really young, maybe there's the opportunity to get up to 25% later. But I just wanted to kind of like table set of like where we're at from like a target share perspective and what these numbers even mean. And so speaking of Rashee Rice, he's right now or this season at about a 20% target share. And that's pretty solid for a wide receiver 2. One thing with rookies, and you should follow him on Twitter. Tim Albtree, I think his Twitter handle is T-Alb or at Albtree, something like that. But if you go to Tim Albtree, I tweet at him a lot. So just maybe go through some of my tweets. I think I tweeted at him the last couple of days. He's posted in the past split for rookies and splits for veterans. And for rookies, the split basically that stabilizes is 8 games. For veterans, it's about 11 games. So if we look at Rashee Rice over the last 8 games, he's got a 20% target share, solid, 10% or so target share, not great. So he remains in a spot for me where I'm starting to question, but like Brian, like his situation is just really good considering he has Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying, and also with the TL tree, we retweeted on our podcast Twitter something he did recently. So if that's an easy way to find his work because it's awesome. But so just speaking in a smaller sample size, you said 8 weeks for a rookie, but for me, I broke it down after their bye just as another outlook. So they had a week 10 bye. his route rate, Rashee Rice's route rate is week 11, 52%, and then 68, 69, 82, 95. So trending in an awesome direction.
Yeah.
And his target share week 12 is 32%, 13, 29, 14, 27%, 15, 26%. So that's speaking to that elite levels that Todd's saying. Smaller sample size, and we know splits can kind of, tell a different story sometimes, but it's something to at least monitor. And once I kind of dove a little bit deeper into him, I definitely am feeling like I've maybe underestimated him, situation or not, just because of such a strong situation.
Yeah, I think my issue with him is that I don't think he's supremely talented. Like right now, he's wide receiver 24 on Fantasy Calc. I don't think he's like a top 25 NFL wide receiver, but he's in an elite situation. And one thing that I really do like about him is that even if a better wide receiver comes along, like I don't think it'll actually happen. But let's just, people spitball T. Higgins. Let's just use T. Higgins as the example. If T. Higgins joined this wide receiver group, I really don't think much changes for Rashee Rice. I think his role, really low ADOT, meaning he's catching balls really close to the line of scrimmage. He's kind of taking over. He's eating into the Travis Kelce role. I mean, it sounds crazy to say because it's Travis Kelce, but he is. I mean, he's taking those zone, right in the middle of the zone catches. He's taking some of those cheap 3-yard plays that he turns into 11-yarders with his yak. I just think his role probably remains, even if they add a really good player. And then if they don't, I still don't think much changes for him because I think that he's kind of is what he is. And he's going to be a guy that Mahomes just kind of hits little 7-yard zone,
And
sits in
and
the zone.
and just building off of that, you also have the Andy Reid Kansas City Chiefs, like crazy, chaotic gadget plays that they do, right? He'll get a couple handoffs, he'll get a couple direct snaps, like all sorts of crazy stuff that they used to do for Tyreek and that crew a few years ago. I see that like Rashee Rice being like a Deebo Samuel in the sense
Yeah.
of low touch, high value.
Yeah, and he's like not as talented as a Deebo Samuel, but he
Right.
in that type of role. But you have Patrick Mahomes and, like you said, Andy Reid. You have those things going for you, combined with the fact that even if they bring somebody in, I think it actually helps Rashee Rice. I think it opens things up more because at this point they're kind of just having to zone in on Rice and Kelce. They're kind of taking away Kelce maybe right now, I guess, and leaving Rice, you could argue. But I think even when we looked at Rashee Rice in college, he was elite of the elite against zone. And Mahomes sees a lot of zone. Mahomes is really good against zone, and he's feeding Rice because of it. So just kind of like thinking about Rice's value, he's wide receiver 24 right now in Fantasy Calc. That's about where I've got him from a ranking standpoint. Just kind of as we were preparing for this, I kind of ran through some wide receiver rankings quickly, and I had him at like wide receiver 21, 22. He's in a tier around there. So I think he's probably appropriately priced. The issue with Rashee Rice, I think, is that it's tough to get someone to trade him away unless you're tearing down from like a Waddle.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know how much they would even put on top of like a DK.
I think it's a good point to make, Todd. Like we've talked so often on this podcast about timing. And right now, I'm not sure this is like if you don't have a trade deadline, I'm not sure this is the time, or if he continues this type of pace for the rest of the season, I'm not sure that's the time because you're going to have to pay high prices. For example, and this is overall points, not points per game, but over the last 4 weeks, he's wide receiver 3 in overall PPR points for wide receivers behind only Debo and CeeDee Lamb. Granted, Tyreek missed a game, so Tyreek's point per game was higher, but 20.3-ish points per game over the last 4 weeks. People are riding high with him. They're labeling him league winner. He's on the Chiefs. This is what everyone's been waiting for. I'm not sure this is the time to buy him if you wanted to get in the Rashee Rice business.
Yeah, and my final kind of comment on that, just from like if you think about like the psychology of the people that have Rashee Rice, most likely they ran through all the time where his snap count was low. They were saying like these good days are coming, and now they're here. Like, they're just not going to give him up for cheap. So, like, it's going to take, like, I would be pretty surprised if you took, like, your 110, 111. I don't think that that's getting Rashee Rice at this point. I think it's going to have to be a higher draft pick, or it's going to need to be, like I said, like an Ayuk or a Waddle tier down type of move. So another guy, like, go ahead.
And we're going to touch on some of the rookie upcoming potential 2024 rookies that you can kind of put a couple faces to the names too. Like the 110 might be this kind of person, right? So that's just something.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, let's talk about one right now. Like, compare Rashee Rice to like Troy Franklin from Oregon. We're going to eventually hit on these rookies or these incoming rookies a lot harder. So maybe we'll put more value to the name at some point. But like Troy Franklin, I think is probably like a guy near the end. A bigger name. Let's go Rome Aduns or whatever his name is. Rome Aduns or Rashee Rice.
And that's like, to me, I would probably take Rashee Rice because you don't know situation, draft capital, but like it also could shift. But that's what we're talking about. If you're trading 110, 111, like he could be in that range for sure, depending on how many quarterbacks, get draft capital, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and let's talk about Addison now. And Addison has the same type of deal where I think I've really undervalued situation in the past, and probably need to put more onus on it. So like Rashee Rice, he walked into an immaculate situation. Now, I think my problem with Rashee Rice is that I didn't like really trust the talent. Whereas with Addison, I had Addison above QJ, and it was really because of the situation for Addison. I had Addison as probably a little bit more talented, but they were same tier from a talent standpoint. But the situation for Addison to me was just supreme, walking into a team that throws it 40 times a game. You've got Kirk Cousins. I mean, really more than that, like 42 times a game last year. This year, they're throwing it like 37 times a game. But even without Cousins, with Josh Dobbs, with Nick Mullins, they're throwing 34 times a game, which, like, if you think about teams right now, that's as much as Houston, the Texans, that's how much they're throwing this year. Feels like they throw a lot. The Vikings are throwing as much as the Texans do with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks for itself right there, right? That's crazy. CJ Stroud versus those guys.
Yeah, like O'Connell just is chucking it. So Addison, like kind of some of his stats, we talked about target share. Addison has a 21% target share this year. And that's in the last 8 games. So I'm looking at the last 8 games because of what I said, like 8 games kind of stabilizes as a rookie. Full season, he's like 18%. So we're talking like 18 to 20% target share type of guy. I think that there's probably more there than what I was giving him credit for. And I think he doesn't really pop when you watch him. Now, you probably think, oh yeah, he does pop. He scores touchdowns. That's not really what I'm looking for. We saw the Mike Williams, like, I guess rookie season, he scored 10. And then like the next year, I think he scored 1. So like the touchdowns things can come and go. So for me, it's like, is he demanding targets? And he's not in an offense that didn't have Justin Jefferson for a lot of the year. So that kind of concerns me. His air yard share is much better than what Rashee Rice is seeing. So he's not like he's not this gimmicky wide receiver that I think kind of Rashee Rice is in a sense. So I think there's something there more than what I was giving Addison credit for. If he wasn't in this high volume Vikings offense, I would definitely be out. But when you're throwing it 40 times a game, a 20% target share is not that bad. That's 8 targets a game. So I can kind of live with that. He's going to be in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson is going to eat a lot of those, but I think Addison, from a target earning standpoint, leaves me a little bit just like not that thrilling. But I think I probably undervalued him a little bit given The situation that he's in.
He's given me, and this is like maybe a little bit of a lazy comp. He's giving me Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller vibes, where like they can help your team, absolutely, but I don't think they were ever going to ascend to like that next level up, like you're talking about 25-30% target share, where it's like league winner, put it on the board, yes, kind of player. So a couple stats that I have a little more on the surface, right? He in this massive week that he just had with Justin Jefferson back, 2 touchdowns, 111 yards, like you talked about, only 6 targets, but he obviously did something with those 6 targets, 6 catches, big yardage, 2 touchdowns. Keeping in mind they played the Bengals, who are one of the worst teams to give up yards in the league. I believe they're tied for 30th in yards given up per game. This was his first touchdown since week 8. So we're talking about like 8-week increments. He's a boom or bust guy that's not scoring touchdowns while Justin Jefferson's out, to me is concerning. It's his first time, and this is maybe just an arbitrary number that I picked, but 15 points per game. This was his first time above 15 points since week 8. His first double-digit fantasy points since week 10. And he has 2. So just like kind of like to circle back into like the Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller comp, he has 2 overall wide receiver 1 weeks, overall number 1 wide receiver, and then a bunch of wide receiver 2 weeks. So that's why I'm kind of pointing to like this being a perfect time to sell if you do have that trade block open, or if he kind of keeps a relatively similar type of usage and pace. I'm selling the crap out of him, whereas Rashee Rice is more of a hold for me at the moment.
Yeah, they're in the same tier for me. So like if I look at KTC, so keep trade cut, Addison's wide receiver 13 on fantasy calc. He's wide receiver 21. So he's in that like wide receiver 17-ish range if we kind of aggregate them. Right now, he's ahead of Nico Collins, which we all heard my Nico Collins rant a couple weeks ago. That's outrageous to me. Like Nico Collins is earning more. He already has CJ Stroud around him. He's doing more with the targets that he's getting. And Addison's doing a lot. You mentioned Addison's doing a lot with the targets he's getting right now, more because of the touchdowns. But Addison, I would be trying to move him for like a couple weeks ago. I had my final Addison share. I traded it away for Devontae Smith. I feel really good about that trade. Devontae Smith to me is like, I think a lot of people made the Addison comp to Devontae Smith, and I'm fairly confident that Addison's not Devontae Smith talent. He should be more valued aligned with Rashee Rice, which is I think why you're saying Rashee Rice is a hold and Addison's a sell, because Addison's valued so much higher than Rashee Rice.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I think it's just something that we have to like. This is where like the personal side, you have to remove it and just be able to like kind of view the situation as it is, person to person, and that's exactly it. I think just Addison is at his peak-ish. I think he's going to be boom or bust. That's just going to be his career. He's going to have awesome weeks where he wins people games, and then he's going to have duds where he doesn't do anything. And that's just where I'm at with him.
Those were 2 of the bigger ones that we wanted to hit on. So maybe we'll hit on some other guys, maybe not go quite as deep on them. We can stick with receiver though. So I'm just going to kind of throw out some names that we'll hit on. Josh Downs, JSN, Flowers, maybe kind of the bigger names. And then I also kind of, if we get to them, Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks have been doing some nice things as well. So in the spirit of Matt not being here, maybe we get to them. But Flowers, let's start there. Flowers concerns me. I'm not sure what's going on there. Flowers is honestly very similar to Rashee Rice in the way that he's being used. He gets a little bit more downfield work. Like he'll get like 1 deep ball a game, which makes his air yard shares look a bit better, his ADOT look better. But ultimately, he's pretty similar to Rashee Rice. And I think that the name value on Flowers just is a lot higher, even though I guess they are valued the same on fantasy calc. So I mean, Rashee Rice, wide receiver 24, Zay Flowers, wide receiver 25. But to me, Flowers concerns me. Like we saw a lot of gimmicky stuff around the line of scrimmage early in the year. That started to fade a little bit. The biggest difference, and we've talked about it. I mean, we're talking a lot of situation here, but the biggest difference for me is that Rashee Rice has Patrick Mahomes. Zay Flowers has Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's great for real NFL, but for his receivers, it's less than thrilling. And I'm going to take the guy that I think has Patrick Mahomes, especially if I think that they're about the same level of talent.
Yeah, all things created equal. It just doesn't make sense if they're an equal player. One has a better situation with better ceiling. That's to me a no brainer. I've been pounding on the desk for Zay Flowers for a long time, and it's just I'm not seeing like that next step like you're talking about. They're almost using him in weirder and less enticing situations, and it's just not something that I really want to be involved in. I'm glad I sold high on some of him now earlier in the season, but like Drake London, for example, I traded Zay Flowers for Drake London when Zay Flowers was skyrocketing. I'm thrilled about that right now.
Yeah, I don't really get what they're doing with Zay Flowers. Like they're using OBJ. Like they're just kind of like every week's a little bit of a different guy. But like Zay Flowers stays in that like 6 to 8, 9 targets, but they're weird targets. They're not like Bateman will get a few nice downfield balls a game that he does nothing with. And OBJ gets a couple downfield balls that he hardly does anything with. Like I wish they would just shift those to Flowers, and they're not. And that concerns me because OBJ and Bateman suck.
Yeah, I want to really quickly just rant about Rashad Bateman. I was super high on him, and I was so devastated when this has become a reality with him. I remember like the scouts were talking about how he was bigger and faster than he was. And then he went to the combine and he was smaller and weighed less and was not as fast. And it was like, crap. Okay. I was definitely too invested in him, but yeah, he sucks. And like to your point, it's just in general, I don't think Baltimore really wants to do like flashy modern things. That's how I view it from like a less of a football guy perspective, is like they are like the equivalent of like smash mouth football in modern days. Low risk, move the ball control, good defense. And it just like, that's not, you're talking about volume in Minnesota or you're getting Mahomes in Kansas City. That's just lose.
Yeah, I just think that we need to start implementing a little bit more situation. I think I've just really, and I mentioned it already, but I just think I've really hammered home that situation doesn't matter. If we were in the type of like leagues that you can't trade, then sure, I'd be okay with passing on whatever the situation is. And that's not to say that I'm going to just disregard talent. I'm going to implement it a little bit more. I'm just going to be more cognizant of, okay, this guy has a Mike McDaniel. This guy has a Kevin O'Connell as their coach. They have a Sean McVay. I should at least monitor that and think if there's something there, they're going to find it. Whereas when these guys go to places like my Titans or they go to the Bears, they just get swallowed up in just shit organization. Just offensive coordinators that have no idea what they're doing. They have no innovation. They play the boomer game of like, you got to earn your stripes, you got to earn your stickers on your helmet to get on the field. And like, what are we doing? Like, play your good players. Get your good players the ball.
I'll tell you what, that pissed me off with Brandon Ayuk too. Shanahan did that boomer game
what are
in
we
the first
doing?
year or two. Like, come on, buddy. Like, he's by far your best option here. And RIP Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I mean, he's another one. Like this past week, he gets like 3 downfield balls. They make the plays on him, but they're too busy throwing to Nick Westbrook-Akine. And like DeAndre Hopkins has been good for a decade. Love him. But if you look at like their separation getting open, Hopkins and Nick Westbrook-Akine are like 2 of the worst in the NFL. Like when I say worst, like out of 120 wide receivers, they're both bottom 10 in getting open. So like that's a problem That's a problem if you just keep running those guys out there. Then they're throwing to Chris Moore. Like the Titans are just a mess. So why not get your guys, your young guys? Your team is terrible. Tyjae Spears, a Burks, like get those guys involved in the offense. And I think that if you look at teams like look at Mike LaFleur, we mentioned Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks. Like they're really good examples of you've got a coach that is finding ways to get his best athletes and best players involved. And if that means I've got to move Romeo Dobbs to the side a little bit, okay, that's what we do. And you just don't see that from every team like we would hope. Like you would hope that like good coaches, that these coaches are at their positions because of they're good at their job, and they're a bunch of boomers that just want to make you earn your tiger stripes, man.
Yeah, they're good talkers. They give a good interview. Their dad was a coach.
They're CEOs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Like coaching 101 should be get good player in space and let him do good things. Like the coach, like maybe it's an ego thing that they're like, we want to win our way with Smash Mouth and this or that. And like, buddy, your personnel says otherwise. Just listen to it. But some people suck.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna add another good one with Ben Johnson. We're gonna add him to the mix, which is something to monitor because that might mean we lose him. We lose Detroit. So keep that in mind as we're like fluctuating these different offenses. Like, all right, you lose Steichen from the Eagles, and now their offense is kind of a mess right now. It was obviously really good early in the year, but like the last few weeks, it's been a mess. So like these coaches matter, and it's something that I'm just gonna be more aware of. And something we might talk about more in the offseason.
So you mentioned Steichen, you mentioned Josh Downs. So why don't we just kind of quickly transition to him? I've been super high on him. I've been, again, pounding the table over and over again for him. I'm getting a little concerned. The only thing that is leaving me with some hope and in general is, first of all, their quarterback isn't playing right now. So Gardner Minshew, I see once a game where he just misses Josh Downs or a player for a notable play. But it's also,
do we think that's going to change with Richardson though?
I don't know, but I'm that's at least that's giving me the hope. Again, I'm a Colts fan, but and then again, Steichen having the confidence in him. But this past week when Pittman got cheap shotted like a mother, Alex Pierce outsnapped Josh Downs after that, and that's concerning because I think Alex Pierce sucks. So that's something that I was afraid of and crying a little bit inside about. So I'm pumping the brakes on Josh Downs. I'm not selling him, but I'm pumping the brakes.
I'm out. I'm done.
Out.
So like last 6 games, Josh Downs has been over a 12% target share one time. Like he's just not earning targets all of a sudden. He was awesome early in the year. He's not earning targets. And we can blame like Minshew. Like I have full trust in Steichen, and Steichen's decided that that's not the guy that we're going to go after, and they're just feeding Pittman. So I'm pretty down on our buddy Josh Downs.
And what does that mean, down? Like, what are you selling him for?
I would want to sell him. That's a good question. I would want to sell him. Let's see. So the guys around him on Fantasy Calc, Marquise Brown, who's somebody that I comped Josh Downs to. Deontay Johnson's there. I think that's a really interesting one for me. So I'm still pretty in on Deontay Johnson. He's got the good part of his career left. He can, he's like, what is he, 27? He's 27. So he can have a good 28, 29, 30 part of his career. Jameson Williams is somebody that I've never been in on, but I think he's showing some things. And if like I can do some sort of deal, Josh Downs and JMO, like if I would rather shop for some guys that may be a little bit more proven, but I think there's probably some more upside with JMO than there is with Josh Downs. That's the other thing with Josh Downs is I just don't see the upside anymore with him. I think I talked about it a few weeks ago. I really had optimism that he could be that 25 to 30% target earner, very much like a Marquise Brown or Deontay Johnson. I don't think he's that. I also don't think he's the athlete that either of those guys are. Deontay Johnson's not a great athlete, but not the athlete that Marquise Brown is. And so I think that's another thing just kind of concerning for me is that even if he gets the targets that everybody wants him to get, I just don't know that he'll do a whole lot with them. And so, I mean, I'm just I think he's probably like a wide receiver 3 type guy on a team, like a wide receiver 3 on a team. Wide receiver, I just don't know that he's going to be that relevant for fantasy.
So just to put you on the spot again here, so Josh Downs and I'm not sure how much rookie upcoming 2024 wide receivers you're familiar with, but I'm going to list a couple, and they will assume are as like late 1 to late 2 type guys. Okay, so like that range of outcome. So, and if you don't know who it is or whatever the case is, so be it. But Xavier Worthy or Josh Downs, you're taking Xavier Worthy, I assume, from Texas.
Yep, I'm taking Worthy. I mean, I think they're very similar type of they're very similar type of looks of like being small, fat. Like Worthy's supposed to be really fast. I just take the upside of the potential upside of Worthy.
So it's a re-roll situation.
Yeah,
right?
re-roll I'd rather easily. No question.
What about Keon Coleman's an interesting one from Florida State. Bigger receiver, got a lot of Quentin Johnson type of traits that I think some people are going to equate to him. So that's someone I think is probably more in the middle to late second type of thing in this class, probably more middle.
I think he ends up falling a good bit. So I would probably take Downs over him. I mean, what I would be looking for with Downs is probably a player. If I could sell him for an early second, sure.
I would take, just to circle back to the vets, I would take Deontay Johnson over Josh Downs unless my team is far away, which I would like to think none of them are, but that's something that also to think about. Like you're saying, you don't necessarily want Deontay Johnson on a team that is 2 years away. So anyway, so we're trying to transition here, and we'll just switch over to, we were talking Addison and Rice as a deep dive. We gave you some secondary guys. Addison and Rice, are you taking, you already mentioned Nico, you're taking Nico above both of Addison and Rice, right?
Yeah, without question. Like I have Nico in the same tier as Devontae Smith, Waddle, Ayuk, Tank Dell, Puka. Like he's up in that grouping for me. I would rather have all those guys than him. So like if I had them, I'd probably want like a little bit of something on top. But like as far as tier, I try to really extend my tiers as much as I can just to give myself more trading options. And also like we adjust these ranks so easily week to week that it makes zero sense to me to be like, no, I wouldn't trade Ayuk for Nico unless I got a whole second. Like, what are we doing? Just like take a couple things, take a couple like backup running backs or something that might be worth it.
Here's another one, just kind of on the other end of the spectrum. Nico's, young, high upside. About Devontae Adams versus Addison or Rice.
I would take Addison and Rice over Devontae Adams. The points per game. I mean, think about your matchups this past week. Think about the games that we've lost in the playoffs, the games that we've won in the playoffs. The difference in those few points is just not substantial enough.
And just to throw myself under the bus real quick, the short term playoff variance, I was 2-11 in my 13 non-bye weeks matchups this week. So like you would have thought, like if you're a win now team, you're like, oh, I should get Devontae Adams over Rashee Rice or over Jordan Addison. Devontae Adams did have a pretty good game, but like Jordan Addison, I know for sure outscored him. I'm pretty sure Rashee Rice was right around the same too. So it's one of those things where you're getting the short term Devontae Adams boost, you would think, but the short term boost isn't always what it looks like. I mean,
like even think like Flowers. I don't think Flowers did much of anything. I mean, like 10 points maybe. Mm-hmm. I bet if you look at, you're in a lot of leagues. You're in probably a lot more leagues than anybody that's listening, and so in those 11 losses, let's just assume you had Devontae Adams on all of them and you subtracted like 10 points. I bet there's very few games where you're like, oh, I would have won that game if I had Devontae Adams, or say I had Flowers. I would have won if I had Devontae Adams instead of Flowers. Like that just doesn't happen as often as people think.
Right. Yeah, it would have impacted potentially 2 or 3, but yeah, you're not going down to the wire like 1-point games on every
Yeah, just
matchup.
like talking about some like game theory on that. We're in a league. Both of us are in a league with David Plout, who was on the podcast back in, I want to say, October. And in that league, he started putting guys on the trade block like Travis Kelce, like I think he actually traded Tyreek a few weeks ago. Like win now type players. He had the best team in the league, or he has the best team in the league. He got the bye. By the way, both of you and I are both tanking in that league, and you want to tell the people how that ended up?
I don't. No, I don't, Todd.
Okay,
Go
so
on.
I ended up getting the 101 on the final week of the season. And you really needed Caleb Williams. But anyways, so we're totally irrelevant in this league at this point. We're full on tanks. And so David is trying to sell. He's the best team in the league, trying to sell his top end win now type of players. And I thought it was a really interesting strategy. So I was messaging him in DM, just like kind of picking his brain on what his thoughts were. And he was basically saying, like, listen, I've already got the bye. I'm not changing the variance that much of my win loss. So if I trade a Kelce who's basically dead after the season's over, and maybe I take a few less like projected points on my week 16, it's not changing the outcome most likely. And if it does, it's just a very slim percentage. You also got to think there's a chance that somebody outproduces Kelce. Like say you take on a tight end that outproduces him. So I just thought it was a really interesting strategy of right before the playoffs. Most people are like, oh, I got to bolster up my team. I got to make some win now moves. I got to trade an Addison for Devontae Adams. He was doing the exact opposite. And I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know that he actually got the only one he got done, I think, was a couple weeks ago. He traded away Tyreek for Olave. And they actually were both out this past week, which it didn't matter.
It's a tough league because it's one that he commissions that I assume a lot of people follow him and read and subscribe to the same type of stuff that he is subscribing to. But just a little additional context. I think I talked to him at some point in the middle of the season, similarly to you. And he was like, yeah, I'm scoring 15 points per week more than second place. So I can afford this type of situation. Right. And it makes total sense. And I think what he's doing is a wise thing to, squeeze value where you can. It's
diminishing returns.
Tough.
I mean, the more that you're winning on a per game basis, it's not adding that much value. And so you'd rather have the value on your roster instead of the value of winning more games by higher amount of points.
Yeah, it's the roster baiting, that's what it is at that point where you can take a screenshot and put it on Twitter and be like, see how my third flex is better than your normal receiver, and someone can comment like, oh, what is this, a 4-person league? Let me in. Like that's what people always do. That's just the classic.
So we talked a bunch of receivers. You want to let's hit on a few tight ends as well.
Yeah. For sure.
So I think one guy that I was really high on, I know you were pretty high on him as well. I think actually in rookie season, we talked some, and I had only gotten maybe like one Dalton Kincaid. And you had flaunted some of your Dalton Kincaid, and I obliged, and I ended up getting a couple more. And so I was pretty high on Dalton Kincaid coming into the season. It didn't start great. Then it started going really well. And now I'm a little bit concerned because I don't know how good he is at the game of football.
Yeah, it's a couple of things in my opinion. The Bills are kind of have been somewhat of a disaster relative terms, anyways. This year, we all thought, okay, good pass catcher in an experienced college route runner. He just, to me, he's just a guy or a jag who has, kind of got the CEH boost of, oh, the Bills needed a red zone target tight end. and he got inflated. I always liked Laporta over him. That was like kind of the flag plant that I had pretty much from the get go. It was easier to do that early in the season than it was in the middle of the season. To your point, Todd. But I think it's coming back into a regression to the mean here, and he is at the back end of the tight ends for me of like those guys that I care about. Otherwise, I'm just like getting like Cole Kmet if I don't have like one of those 5 or 6 guys.
I mean, Cole Kmet's kind of a good comp, honestly. They look very different, but as far as like their skill, he's probably a Cole Kmet, but he has Josh Allen, and he's a little bit younger. So like the value for him, I think for me, probably a little bit out on him at cost. And I think he probably falls into more of like the mid tight end range. Whereas there for a while, I was like, okay, like what's the difference between him and Sam Laporta? And we've learned over the last few weeks the difference between him and Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is really good, and I don't know that Dalton Kincaid is.
And
so yeah,
and
I think
this isn't a victory lap, but I sold Kincaid after his first good game for a 24-1 on a tank. I'm not sure if that's a good move or a bad move yet, but that's something that I know people were laughing at me a couple weeks after that move. Like, haha, you idiot, you sold low, blah, 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 blah. And maybe I am an idiot, and it might not be because of that, though. So that's what's
yeah, I was
just
gonna
something
say
like, that's
right.
the jury's definitely still out for both my idiocy and Dalton Kincaid, I guess is the point.
Yeah, like I like you can't be in really a better situation than what he's in Buffalo. You have Josh Allen, you got Dawson Knox getting hurt. Like, what else can you really ask for? Obviously, tight ends take a little bit more time to develop, but a lot of the thing with tight ends is that it takes them more time to get on the field. Like, he's on the field. He's just
Sure.
not he's just not doing a lot with the targets, and he's not doing a lot with the catches either.
And
Like the
and
catches that he gets.
I'll say this, and I don't do a lot of or much of any film review. I rely on other people because they're smarter than me in that sense. Uh, Zoltan, for example, Mike, who we also have had as a guest, he was super and is still super high on Kincaid. I would like to check in with him soon just to kind of see how he's feeling. Because he was Kincaid 108, 109, 107 range for rookie drafts in tight end premium before the season during rookie season. So I would love to check back in with him here soon.
Yeah, so like if like speaking of rookie season, so Kincaid versus like Brock Bowers, who will
Mm,
probably go like 105, 106. If we assume Jaden Daniels is like around 104, we can only just assume what we know today. So like I'm assuming like Caleb Williams, and then you got like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Drake May, Jaden Daniels like in the top 4, and then you've got some sort of like Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers like 105, 106. So I kind of think of like this class as like the elite top 6 is that group. So Kincaid versus Brock Bowers. And
For
you got to
me,
remember, Brock Bowers could go to a nonsense situation.
that's why I was just about to say you stole a slight bit of my thunder here. Is that I'm very much skeptical of tight ends with the situations after Pitts, and it's just to me like Brock Bowers is not a sure thing. He's a little bit smaller on the tight end scale. He is quick. He's had a lot of college success, but they've also like focused him as being like their number one receiver more or less for 2 or 3 years. So I think his hype might get a little bit ahead of his potential here. So that's someone that's probably a sell for me, honestly. So I guess
Okay,
I would take Kincaid.
I would kind of like what you mentioned earlier, the reroll. I would probably reroll into Brock Bowers because as of today, I think he'll probably be a top 10 pick. And if he's not, then who cares?
And
Because I don't have to make
and
that
if
decision
Bowers
for
goes top 10
guys.
into like a fun situation that I like a coach that isn't a moron, then
Yeah, then it's wheels up.
yeah, exactly.
I'm just not sold that Kincaid's any good. That's my biggest issue. Like when I watch him, I'm just like, all right. sweet catch, bro. Like nice
And
7 yards.
he's just not going to get the you mentioned Minnesota's volume. He's not going to get the TJ Hawkinson like volume boost probably ever with Buffalo. I would imagine, but maybe he will. I think
Yeah, I mean
that's his closest route.
yeah, they throw a lot. I think like I don't want to put words in like Mike's mouth, but I think what Mike has Dynasty Zoltan, whenever he came on the podcast, one thing that he talked about was he wanted to see them use Kincaid downfield more, and we're not seeing that. And I think by week 6-15, we would have hoped to have seen that, and maybe that's something they do next year. If there comes a point where Kincaid is being valued at like wide receiver 10 range, I'll probably be back in on him. Like that's more interesting to me. But like right now, on Fantasy Calc, he's tight end 6 ahead of Kyle Pitts or Kincaid.
Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I'm pretty out on Kyle Pitts. If you want to hear my full reasoning, go like I don't know
every other episode
8 weeks ago, and I'm pretty out on him. But I was out on him at cost when he was like tight end 2. Now at tight end 7 behind Kincaid, I'll take Pitts. I think Pitts is more talented than Kincaid. I don't know that Pitts is that talented that everybody thinks he is. I think everybody's just blaming Arthur Smith. And I think Arthur Smith is a lot to blame, but I also don't think Pitts is as talented at football, at receiving, as people think.
Kyle Pitts had one great college season, basically, similar to Kadarius Toney. They had, just a blow-up season. I'm not going on the same route as you are necessarily, but that is something of note. It wasn't like he had this 3-year Brock Bowers college domination. So,
yeah. So, let's talk about a couple of Packers here just to support the fans of Matt and anybody that might be wondering, like, do we love him and do we want to talk about Packers? So I'm not talking about Jordan Love because I don't want to pry my eyeballs out, but I will talk about his tight ends, Luke Musgrave and Kraft. What is Kraft's first name? Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft. I will talk about both of them. And I think that there's been a lot of steam on Kraft these last few days. And I'm here to say, like, y'all need to pump your brakes. Kraft probably sucks. Musgrave might not be that good, but I think he's better than Tucker Kraft.
In rookie season, I took a bunch of flyers on both of them because it was so cheap in early rookie season. You could get both of them in the 3rd round, maybe later. They were starting to get some steam once they were like, hey, Musgrave is the tight end 1, blah, 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 blah. That Musgrave eventually moved ahead of him, but I have a bunch of both. I liked Kraft. He looked athletic to me. He had some injury concerns where that was like, to me, what maybe dropped him to where he did drop. But to me, like college injuries that aren't necessarily something that are going to be repeatable. I think he runs hard. I think he's got potential. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar or even a star, but he's, I think, probably better and more valuable than what whoever has him paid for him.
Luke Musgrave, when he was playing with Kraft behind him, he was more productive than Kraft has been since Musgrave got hurt. And so that's what I'm going to go off of. Like, Musgrave did it in this first. When I say did it, I don't mean like he was very good. Like he was pretty mediocre. But Kraft has just been excessively underwhelming. Like,
yeah, I'm not necessarily taking. I'm not going the David Gautier route and saying I'd take Tucker Kraft over Musgrave because I also think Jordan Chosen One Love missed Musgrave just about every week on, it seems like, the first 4 or 5 weeks of like a 40, 50, 60-yard play that Musgrave's stats would have been outrageous probably. So, yeah, I mean, I think they have 2 talented-ish tight ends, and it's going to be interesting.
I think Musgrave is probably a buy for me in the offseason at like that 3rd round type value. I think people have just completely dismissed him. He got hurt. He wasn't that good, but I think he's like a type of guy like a Cole Kmet that could just kind of be a touchdown or bust. I wouldn't mind him being my tight end 2 on a team. And when my Trey McBride gets hurt for a week or he's on bye, sure, I'll slide in Musgrave and then wait for my McBride to come back.
It's pretty much the tight end landscape is 5 or 6 guys and then a bunch of guys that you would want to party with. That's how I view the tight end position. It's like, okay, this guy's probably a good flip cup partner. Here we go. That's who I'm picking. After a certain
Jake
point,
Ferguson,
like,
by the way, he seems like a good flip cup partner.
Boom. See, that's what I'm talking about. Like tight end U is just it's electric. That's what I look for outside of the elite guys.
Someone that I can party with.
That I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, I want to be able to laugh. Like, maybe they'll have some funny sound bites. Like, I guess my point is, it's not gonna matter outside of those 5 or 6 guys. Usually, find a guy that's talented, athletic, in a decent situation, and they'll get you, like you're saying, those boomer bust weeks.
Yeah, and just like tight end as a whole, I think one strategy that I used to take, and I think a lot of people take the strategy of I'm going to get a bunch of these young guys, and then I'll hope that one of them hits and they become the elite guy. I think it's just so incredibly rare for these guys to pop into like the top 5. Basically, my strategy is don't really have a tight end until I'm a contender. And then once I become a contender, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fork over the coin and I'm going to go get the Mark Andrews, the Travis Kelce, the Hawkinson.
It's funny you say that because like David Plout is kind of different in the sense of I've talked to him a little bit on his tanks. He targets quarterbacks and tight ends as elite. Like he'll go like Mark Andrews and you know, whoever, Lamar Jackson or whoever, because that's his boy, or Kyler. He wants those types of pieces as his building blocks and leave obviously running back empty. But he targets tight end big time.
Yeah, so that's one thing I like to try to get a 0 on a tank, because I think it's pretty easy to get fairly close to zeros on running back. And then if you just like don't have a tight end, it's an easy place just to take a 0. I think I had on one tank team, I had Elijah Higgins basically all season at tight end. And it made my tank really easy because I had a bunch of receivers. Like I have Garrett Wilson, Nico Collins. Like I got a bunch of receivers built out on that team. And then, of course, picks. I've got elite quarterbacks. So, like, if I can build a couple of elite quarterbacks, I can build some good receivers. And then I just take zeros at tight end and running back. That's typically my strategy. And then when it's time to contend, I'm like, all right, I got all this paper stacked. Let's go out and let's buy a Porsche.
I like taking a 0 on the super flex. Honestly, that's my play usually.
How do you think
aside from
0 on Superflex?
Well, 0 in the sense of you not have a second quarterback, I should say. So you build out talent of like your other positions. So like your 3 wide receiver spots, quarterback spot, maybe tight end if you get one of those elite guys, but then you can have more or less 0 receiver, running backs, blah, 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 that you're going to get a 0 in the super flex. And I just think people sometimes.
And when you say 0, you're saying like you're getting like 8 points.
0 quarterback impact, right? So you're not going to get those 30 or 40 point weeks. You'll have some guys. You'll have like a Jawan Jennings that has a 15-point week, but he's also going to have a bunch of zeros, kind of thing. Those are the types that I target usually. I don't know if that's good or bad, but just another approach. Before we wrap up here, I think we are talking rookies. We have to talk. There's a big conversation going on with Bijan versus Gibbs. And I just want to put my 2 cents in here real quick, Todd, and then hopefully we agree and we can shake hands and move on with our days here. But
we're not going
Bijan to me is someone that when he's used appropriately is a running back 1. He is the running back 1 when used appropriately. If you want to split hairs and say he's a running back 2 and Gibbs is 1, fine. But like to me, that doesn't warrant trade Bijan for Gibbs. Bijan had 4 more catches in 5 of the first 6 games, and then they just kind of shit on him there. In the 13 games that he's played, he's been a RB2 or better. Not that we're targeting RB2 as like our goal, but a decent floor, 10 out of 13 times. And he's had 5 top 12 weeks within that. And again, Arthur Smith could be gone and hopefully cast into hell forever. So to me, Bijan's talent didn't go away. every time that he's given the opportunity, he shows that he's a stud. And just because Gibbs is going off, which he absolutely is, which I'm going to hit some stats here in a second with him, that doesn't mean you give up Bijan for Gibbs. Go get Gibbs if you want, but don't give Bijan up for that, or vice versa, in my opinion. So
Can
for
I quickly
Gibbs,
comment on
yeah,
Bijan before we
yeah,
get to Gibbs?
yep,
One thing that always happens every offseason is we get through the year and then people start really digging into the numbers and they say, oh, we didn't notice this about player XYZ. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown. People were like down on him at the end of the year, like, oh, he's not probably not that good. And then like going into his year two, like it got like halfway through the summer and people like, oh, wait a second, he actually is good. And like you kind of compile more things. And I think one thing that we're gonna end up seeing, and you're not gonna see it for probably a few months, is you're gonna start seeing people question if Bijan's any good. And the
for
reason
sure.
I say that is his advanced numbers are not good. Like if you look at his PFF rushing grade, not good. You look at like his yards after contact, not very good. His missed tackles force per attempt is okay. He's just not doing what we were wanting him to do. And I don't know totally like is that like part of the situation that he's in? Like he's just not in a good situation because like it's better. He's doing better than Tyler Algier, but Tyler Algier is like one of the worst in the NFL this year. So it may not be that Bijan is bad, but his numbers aren't exactly bad. So I would just kind of like be mindful of the fact that we might get to a point where people are like, whoa, Bijan sucks, man. He's actually not that good. Let's drop him down a little bit. Or maybe not drop him down necessarily with the rankings, but like drop him down as in like we don't value him as much. Maybe he's still like running back 2, but he's going at the end of the second instead of like the early to mid second of
Yeah,
starters.
I think that, and this is an extreme example, but I think if Bijan had gotten drafted to, let's say, the Dolphins and Achan was drafted to the Falcons, people would be salivating, drooling all over themselves over Bijan, and Achan would be a totally forgotten. He was a fringe 1-2. Now is he even a 2 value wise? So
Used like
again, we're
Keaton
talking
Mitchell
about
throughout the
situation and
season.
usage. So it's a matter of like he's being abused by his coaching staff and their lack of creativity and intelligence, in my opinion. So they're giving him touches, but like they're not giving him the touches that he should be getting, both volume wise and situation where he's in space where he can do the things he's good at. Right? No one ever said he was a perfect running back. I never heard that. So I mean, it's just
Bijan,
crazy to
just
me.
like from a value standpoint, I've got several AJ Brown. I've got a little bit of Waddle. I think if I can, I'll probably try to go buy some Bijan in the offseason. I think he's a guy that I wouldn't mind just sticking in my running back spot and just rolling for 4 or 5 years and um, letting him however his career goes, it goes. Maybe hopefully like around the Jonathan Taylor type. And he'll probably have a hurt injury season, but he'll probably have some really good seasons too.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I mean, we know running back is volatile. We can't really predict it, so get the best guy. And if he gets hurt, like Christian McCaffrey, people are paying for that. They gave up on Christian McCaffrey, and they're dumb. They look like an
Yeah, like
idiot.
an anchor RB is kind of like what I'm looking toward.
Yeah. So quick before we wrap here, Jahmyr Gibbs, he missed weeks 5 and 6. I think everyone was a little underwhelmed before 5 and 6. So like weeks 1 through 4, weeks 7 through 15, including their bye, 8 weeks. He has been a top 3 overall running back 5 times. His yard per carry, which jumped off the page to me, I didn't realize this. I thought he was getting a little more pass usage to boost his numbers, but his yards per carry is over 6 during that span on 100 carries. So 100 carries, 613 yards, which is outrageous. He's getting some red zone touches, not all of them. We've talked about this at great length, so we'll save you there. But it's just, to me, Gibbs is absolutely a guy that you want. He's better than maybe advertised, or to some people, based on the size BS that they were saying about him. But I just don't. I've seen people tweet and people have asked me about trades already. Like, hey, would you want to sell Bijan for Gibbs? And I'm like, no. said it to two different people, 0% chance that I'm doing that 1-for-1. Doesn't make sense.
I would probably have to move Gibbs to running back 1 just because of the points differential. But like I'm not they're in the same tier. It's like what I was talking about earlier with like wide receiver tiers. I'll take the guy that's on my team, and if you really want to make the move, like then make me move. Give me a reason to. But they're basically similar value. Sure, Gibbs is doing it this year, but like that doesn't mean he won't. That doesn't mean he's going to do the same thing at the beginning of next year. That also doesn't mean that Bijan's going to be doing this starting of next year. That loss this past week to the Panthers is going to weigh very heavily on the fact on whether Arthur Smith returns, and they lose one or two more games. I think like he's basically done, and we're a Ben Johnson hiring away from volcano eruption season. Like we're just like everybody just goes ham.
Buckle up.
So you and Matt are going to be doing the other podcasts, which we'll post on Thursday. I'll let you guys do your buys of the week. Then I'm going to basically cheat and just say similar to what I said last week, but I'm going to give a couple of different names. So last week I talked about buying some of the old guys as soon as the season's over. From a trading standpoint, I think we just have to kind of look at it as if you're in the playoffs still, make moves that make sense to help you win. Like if you need to go trade for Joe Flacco, then go do it. Like from a value standpoint, I think we talk more about that like during the regular season, those value changes in those trades. So right now I'm kind of thinking like, all right, the season's over from a value trading standpoint. And so I want to think about when the trade deadline passes, what kind of moves can I be making? And I want some guys that are worth like late seconds, early thirds, maybe a mid-second that can give me points next year, that can basically like fill out my roster. One that I really like because I think he's basically locked into being on the team next year. They'll probably bring in a young guy, but like he'll be a key point for them is James Conner. So like an early third, like when people get to like, oh, I need my picks. Like I'm a rebuild team. Like I don't want James Conner anymore. Give me anything. Like I'll give you an early third for James Conner because I'm pretty sure that he'll be like, if I've got that anchor running back strategy that I'm talking about, James Conner would be a really nice guy to just fill out my roster for a year. So guys like him, I've mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. He's not very good, but he continues to earn targets. If he goes somewhere else, it could be worth it. Like I'm talking about like an early third when people are draft pick season. So really think about guys like that. I think on another one with Keenan Allen being hurt, the end of the season is just looking really just not great for that whole offense for one, but like Keenan Allen for like a mid to late second. It sounds really crazy to say these things right now, but when the pick bros start really getting excited about their picks, those types of trades happen. Like I traded for Keenan Allen for a mid-second after the season last year. I saw Mike Evans go for mid to late seconds during the offseason last year.
What about, I was going to say Mike Evans is another one that I would in the same unsexy spot in the offseason acquisition, or is it finally his time to croak?
Yeah, like Mike Evans for a mid to late second. Yeah. I would be good with that. The one thing that I'm staying away from, and I'm even going to be staying away from it early next year, and we'll be talking about it during the offseason some. We're going to try to do like a podcast basically every week throughout the offseason. But I'm going to be trying to stay away from first values. So like 25 firsts for those old guys. Like the Austin Ecklers of this past offseason, I'm not trying to I'm kind of done with that. And if I have to do it like before a trade deadline, before the playoffs next year, okay, that's a little different. Like a Diggs, I'd rather just roll with my guys, and then next year at the deadline, I have to go to a Diggs. Yep. So those are the types of moves that I'm trying to make. As soon as the season's over, people are kind of done with Dynasty at that point. But maybe you can, as soon as the college football season ends and we start getting into the combine, that's when people really get excited. So those early thirds, you're a tank team. I would start utilizing those late seconds, try to just get flex worthy type players that can be around for a couple more years.
Right. Those rookie wide receivers, for example, or the 2024 rookie wide receivers that we mentioned, their names are going to carry a lot more cachet in a few months for sure.
Yeah. All right. So this, I don't know what episode we're calling this, around 1.14. That'll probably be y'all's episode that y'all do tonight, which we post on Thursday. So this is just kind of maybe an extra one. So we will continue to be back about once a week. We'll see how Christmas goes. We'll keep you
Christmas
updated on the podcast. Brian can be found on Twitter at Brian_O'Leary1. I can be found on Twitter at Dynasty SFlex. Do us a favor and give us a follow on the podcast, on the Twitter podcast account. That is at market_watch1. And give us a review. I think we're up to maybe around 8 or 9 on Apple now. So that's good to see. Give us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
And just one more thing, Todd, sorry. And if you like this type of episode, if you want to hear from other people, like other rookies, other types of players that we haven't been able to deep dive on, let us know and give us some feedback. And we want to get to people that people want to cover. So
yeah, for sure. And we're going to touch on more 2024 rookies here in the next few weeks once the season wraps. So best of luck to everybody in their playoff semifinals and championships. Hopefully they go better than Brian's quarterfinals did. Condolences to those teams, but I know he has 15 teams in the semifinals right now. So for Brian, for myself, thanks for joining the Dynasty Market Watch podcast.